Really cool. In the fall, I had the unique opportunity to conduct research out in Yakama, Washington. While there, I collaborated with Julia Stringfellow at the Central Washington University Library, Mike Siebol, the curator of collections at the Yakama Valley Museum. Additionally, I spent considerable time with Native American artisan HollyAnna CougarTracks DeCoteau LittleBull. The purpose of my research was to explore, examine, and draw attention to a Native American handcrafted fashion accessory known as the Plateau Beaded Bag. These bags are more than consumer products to be bought and sold, more than images to be circulated, and more than just objects inside a museum. They are living testimonies that speak of the material culture of the Yakama women and are worth acknowledging as a significant cultural artifact. They contribute to what is known as cultural noise. What is cultural noise? It's the culture of making things. According to LittleBull, just being around it, watching my mom, aunts, grandparents, and uncles, that is how I learned. And when kids are exposed to all the cultural background noise, it quietly inspires them to want to be makers also. Here are 4 generations of beaded bags that together they represent the cultural noise. Isabel Craig, Amanda French Watlamet, Aline Watlamet Dakota, HollyAnna CougarTracks Dakota LittleBull. These Plateau beaded bags are rooted in the past, as demonstrated in this exhibit, which celebrates the indigenous cultures of the Columbia River Plateau. It combined historical items and photographs alongside contemporary works of art from 3 women artists, Leanne Campbell, Bernadine Phillips, and HollyAnna CougarTracks Dakota LittleBull. The horse on the right of the platform features beadwork done by LittleBull, included a beaded bag hanging from the saddle horn. She briefly explains her process of working with animal hide. There are several outside influences that work together to create a fashion system for beaded consumer goods. One group was the fur trappers and the Hudson Bay Fur Company. The trappers supplied the beads for their wives to incorporate them into clothing and traveled the trade routes to transport them across the different regions out west. This photograph, taken in 1910, shows the inside of a Hudson Bay Company store in Seattle, Washington. The floors are covered with layers of carpet. The walls are lined with woven baskets and pottery, and the glass cabinets are filled with a variety of objects and accessories. The Hudson Bay Fur Company used these stores to market and sell Native American objects, like this one from the museum with its original price tag of $8. They were also circulated through the region through games of chance and gambling. Notice this photograph of a gathering of people. They are all engaged in a fun evening playing a game of chance. The one woman that is kneeling with her arm raised up uses her hands to signal a bet for her beaded bag propped up alongside her leg. Here is the bag, an example that was donated to the Yakama Valley Museum, used for this pastime. Photographers work to circulate the images of Native American fashion. For example, in this photograph taken by Thomas H. Rutter, he has Kadena Chenoweth sitting down for her portrait. She has on a 2-piece outfit, consisted of a blouse with a high collar trimmed with lace with small pleats running down the front, full leg of mutton sleeves, and she's wearing a full-length skirt made out of fabric with a geometric design, and in her lap is a fringed shawl. The unidentified woman standing next to her has a tailored dress out of striped fabric with similar shaped sleeves, and over her arm rests the beaded bag. This image depicts the infusion of European clothing with Native American fashion. The note that went along with this image said that the beaded bags were a, quote, a popular item among Plateau Indians at this time, end of quote. Here is another example of a portrait taken by Thomas H. Rudder. This time it's of Chief White Swan, a prominent leader of the Yakama people, and there are two bags in the Yakama Valley Museum that represent his family. These images of Yakama people provide profit for the photographers. They also document the fashion of the period. Today, LittleBull and other descendants of the portrait sitters are using these images to remember and extend their family heritage. Just a reminder, this photograph was in the background of LittleBull's exhibit as grandmother taught. I did visit other museums in the surrounding areas, but spent most of my times inside the Yakama Valley Museum, which has a vast 65,000 square foot building and houses over 150 Plateau beaded bags, with 64 of them on display. There I examined over 48 of them. The bags in the main exhibit represent the creativity of the Yakama women and provide insight into how the museum built up their collections. Generosity of donors, local establishments, and mainly from gifts from individual people. The objects not out on display are stored in the back storage area, off limits to the public, and housed inside large metal storage units that protect them from light, dust, and insects. Siebol, who has worked with several interns in the past and values the importance of museums being a place of study, had set up for my visit a computer area, a work area, and a photograph area. To make sense and bring organization to all the information gathered from my observations, I looked for similarities and differences. To do that, I created an Excel spreadsheet, and each line represents one bag. I started with the general information about the bags provided by the museum. For example, catalog number, donor, manufacture date, area of origin, and the list of materials. From that, I broke down the bag into three parts: the back panel, the lining, and the binding, reporting the types of fabric that I observed. If I saw any repeated elements, for example, colors or printed patterns, then subdivided those features. It was important to include the provenance history and any special notes from the museum files, because it provided the narrative for the bags. I looked at what was inside them for any insight into the purposes. These are my interpretations of what they were used for: raffles or prizes, gifts, and featured in art exhibits. Here is an example of the types of fabric that were used on the back panel and inside linings, along with the number of bags that I counted. While examining one back panel with the title "Beginning of Dream Religion," it shows at one time it was covered with green wool or felt, but now you can see the lines drawn from another pattern. Several had an additional embroidery patterns. In my paper, I narrow my focus on three bags that were made from red wool trade cloth. Hear what LittleBull had to say about the importance of using this fabric. And bags, and they could use them for bags, right? Josephine Smartlowat had two of her bags in the collection, and to make the fringe, it involved an extra piece of buckskin placed between the front and back panel, sewed together and then cut from the inside. The bag would be turned right side out, and each thong would be moistened by the mouth and rolled across the thigh to give it shape. Katie Perriette had four bags, one from each decade. Here's a close-up of the additional beadwork, and it appears to be influenced by a European lace pattern. Both demonstrate their craftsmanship and advanced beadwork skills. One question that came up during the examination of the beadwork: what is a signature bead? Mixing beads was common practice, and sometimes it was necessary to complete the project if they didn't have enough of one color. But mainly the evidence of a single different bead within the background or a pattern was a signature. The women believed that no one was perfect but the creator. This practice is still being done today. LittleBull and her family still incorporate their family signature into their beadwork. For example, the blue beaded cross in the yellow cuff is their fashion label. LittleBull also incorporated a sunflower design interwoven in the yellow background, demonstrating her skillful pattern work, but also holds special meaning to her. A sunflower represents the oldest daughter. Her head hangs down as she watches over the younger children, siblings, and cousins. LittleBull is that person. The red beaded bonnet on the right demonstrates her creativity, mixing a variety of different colored beads, feathers, and techniques. She constructs value judgments about them before incorporating them into her art pieces, and that judgment is based on her knowledge, experience, and taste. As of 2022, this piece was gifted to the Washington State Historical Museum collection. These are just some of the examples of what she can do. During my trip, I witnessed other locations that work with beaded bags. The Miners Drive-In restaurant, best known for their large burgers and fries. Here are several photographs taken from inside the dining area of that restaurant. A large glass exhibit with a family of Native American mannequins dressed in a mixture of clothing selections. Included hanging garments from the back on the back walls with dresses, vests, and bags. The Miners are private collectors, and during my research came across several bags that listed them as their owners. The Bowlby's Gun and Pawn Shop, the new trading post. According to their website, pawn shops allows ones to borrow money using an item of personal property as security without selling it, taking pride in fair, reasonable loans and quality products at reasonable prices. Here's an example of a bag that I purchased. In conclusion, these bags are made of more than forces of the past that circulated Native American narratives, more than museum objects to be collected, curated, and preserved, but are fashion accessories that still impact the Yakama women of today. Or if there's a lack of words to adequately define these beaded bags, let it understand the complex culture of the Yakama community, then look at the beaded bag as a fashion that plays an important role in communication. Here is an underlying discourses that formulate the consumerism and public opinion of the Native American culture that stems from a mixture of voices of the past, photographs, and the museum curators. However, based on the creation of the Plateau Beaded Bags, the definition of a signature bead, and the explanations from LittleBull, these bags speak of the material culture of the Yakama women. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation and that you'll discover that museums, libraries, and objects, as well as personal interviews, can make a great study and share with us the values of learning about history and our past.